I appreciate your choice of words there, giving exposure to various topics as we speak about sunscreen. You're good.
No pun intended, but
Oh, no. We didn't rehearse this 4 times.
No, not at all. Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying Cosmetics, where I sit down with industry thought leaders about various aspects of cosmetics that maybe a lot of individuals haven't had a ton of exposure to. I'm very excited to be sitting down with Mr. Mark Chandler. Mark is the president of ACT Solutions Corp, which is a formulation design consultancy and laboratory founded in 2012. ACT Solutions Corp provides application support to ingredient technology companies and formulation training for brands and contract manufacturing. Mark is entering his 40th year in the industry with roles in technical sales, marketing, strategic planning, and research. He has taught continuing education courses for over 20 years and is a frequent lecturer in the cosmetic science program at the University of Toledo. Mark was awarded fellow status by the Society of Cosmetic Chemists in 2014 and just finished his term as the national president. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate your choice of words there, giving exposure to various topics as we speak about sunscreen. You're good.
No pun intended, but
oh, no. We didn't rehearse this 4 times.
No, not at all. And thank you. 40th year in the industry.
Yes.
The amount of energy that you bring to conversations and to lectures that I've seen, I am very surprised by that number.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've survived every time I've jumped off the stage and back on. So I'm hoping to keep that going.
Very good. Well, I was introduced to you at I believe it was, an industry event. And really, it was by a gentleman who, a very well-respected mentor to me. And he had mentioned, this is the SPF expert. And I think, more and more as I've worked with you over the years or, pinged you for mind-boggling issues that I only knew one person could solve, it's become abundantly clear that you are and have been embedded in this area for a very long time. So I thought what a great opportunity to be able to talk to you today. So I had wanted to go into the SPF area because my very first introduction into the industry was within SPF development. And I think that over the years, I've learned more and more, but there wasn't one single area that I was able to obtain, really that preliminary background on everything. So there's been a lot of disparate information I've gained over the years through experience. So was wanting to really kind of get a good introduction for people with the help of you.
Great.
Wonderful. So let's start with some basics. So when people think of SPF, we are concerned with UV rays, but there are different types of UV rays. Can you give us an overview of the different UVA, UVB, and UVC rays and how they impact human health?
Yes, love to do it. We'll start at the longer wavelength. We'll get scientific here for a little bit. On the longer wavelengths, 400 nanometers down to about 320, those, as I said, are longer wavelengths. There's less energy, but they're the ones that penetrate deeply within the skin. And so they're the ones that get in and can create what are called reactive oxygen species or free radicals. In our political season, okay, that's something different, okay?
I know. I mean, it's top of mind for a lot of us. Tomorrow is going to be election day. However, we'll try to keep the stress levels to the minimum.
Yes. And so, but what those free radicals in the skin do is they can do damage to DNA. And when we get hit with a lot of UV radiation, especially what's called UVA, and we can think of that as aging rays. And so they're penetrating deeply within the skin, and those reactive oxygen species can affect the DNA, down to the DNA level of the skin, with the connective tissues and other aspects of the skin. And when we get hit with a lot of UV light at one time, we go into what's called an immunosuppressed state, where the skin loses its ability that it's been designed to have to when a DNA strand is damaged. We're designed such that the body goes in and destroys it so that it can't replicate. But what happens when we're in this immunosuppressed state is that the DNA, and this can be for as long as 24 hours after sun exposure. So we're still getting the damage over a longer period of time. And so it's allowed to replicate in that damaged form. And it will continue to replicate in that. It doesn't, all of the DNA is not damaged, but certain strands are within the skin matrix. And so that's what can cause the spots. What appears to be premature aging as the connective tissues, don't connect. Hence their name. In the collagen and elastin in the skin, and it's also what can catalyze carcinogenicity. Or cancer. And when we think about urban areas, I used to think the whole pollution protection thing was pretty silly, and a really nice marketing ploy. Turns out that these small pollutants that are angstrom sized can get in through the barrier. And when they get hit with that UVA radiation, can create even more reactive oxygen species and really get that going. So when we think about daily sun exposure in urban areas, a sunscreen can be one of your ultimate anti-aging products, because we can be using a classic anti-aging product, which this doesn't show up on the label, but in fact certain bioactives can reverse some of those effects that the sun has brought on, as well as aging, chronological aging, and the other effects of lack of sleep, stress, other
daily
areas, daily life, that make our skin not look as young as it could look. But if we're using one of those products, yet every day getting a little bit more aging, and when we're outside, when we're by a window, about 80% of the UV radiation goes through window glass.
Really?
And car window glass.
So help me understand that piece, because I think when we think about sun exposure, right, we think, well, the only way I can tell if I'm being exposed is because I develop a tan, I develop sunburn. So, so it is, how is that different than, if we are exposed to 80% of the UV rays in a window, why do we see that lack of manifestation of a sunburn, of a tan response a lot of times?
It's because, and sometimes I joke, well, if you've ever been promoted to an office with a window, you think they like you, but in fact, they're just putting you on an accelerated aging program.
The accelerated retirement program?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. So because they're a little bit, insecure in their life. And so, it does turn out that there have been photos taken left and right of people's faces and noticed whether they are over a long period of time getting more sun exposure on one side of their face than the other. And so you bring up a good point about getting a tan. Now, tanning is also the result of UVA exposure. So that's the UVB we think of as burning rays. And that's the delineation. So the tanning and the burning, when you go to a tanning booth, they are cutting out the UVB radiation. And, as they sell these services, we've cut out all the harmful UVB radiation that causes the sunburn and giving you the pure undiluted UVA radiation, which really does a number on your skin. And so it's the day in and day out where you don't see a tan necessarily because you're not getting enough UVA radiation to bring on the tanning effect. Though when you do sophisticated photography, you can tell a difference in the sides of the face.
And then UVC, just briefly. So UVC, as I understand, is mostly filtered out by the environment, the ozone, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And though we have holes in the ozone, you would burn to a crisp immediately if there was significant amount of UVC.
So luckily, that is not a problem we have to tackle quite yet in terms of formulation.
We're going
trajectory shall see.
Other things will get us long before. And with the UVA radiation, something to remember with that, which is interesting for it being a part of an anti-aging is that unlike UVB radiation, time of day and time of year are not as big a factor.
Oh, okay.
So when you look at, not getting a sunburn, in the summer, midday, whole lot more UVA radiation. But time of day, time of year, as you look at that curve, is much more flat. So on your daily commute back and forth, you're still getting similar amounts of UVA radiation than you're getting at midday.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I like to liken UV radiation, UVA and UVB, to different other parts of life. And if we can think of UVA radiation, I don't know how many baseball fans we have out there, but the Tampa Bay Rays, all right? The Rays. They have been at the bottom of the American League East very often, so your radiation going very deeply, and Tropicana Stadium, very low energy there. So, so think of your UVA radiation as aging rays, but also the Tampa Bay Rays.
There you go. All right. also, so we throw around this term SPF, SPF, SPF. But what is SPF and sun protection factor? I feel like our industry does really good at acronyms, but this is one that should be well known by everyone. But when we talk about SPF, what is it?
Oh, what a great question. I was like to ask the young people that I work with, and I work with a team of young scientists who are working on their undergraduate and want to get into cosmetic science. So I have to add 3 of their ages together to get to mine. So it's.
I feel like this would be a really good. I wish I had thought of this earlier. An opportunity for you to ask them what is SPF, and then
right.
we could read verbatim what their belief is, because
Yes.
I don't think it's not, right. It's just something you say, but I don't know if too many people understand how either the FDA defines it or,
Yes.
in a very scientific technical term, what it means. So please share your knowledge with us.
I would be happy to. First question I ask them is, do you have any idea of what those letters stand for? And it's sun protection factor. And it was a test designed decades ago. It's far from a perfect test. Sun protection factor is the multiple of time you can stay out in the noonday sun, and they've redefined it from Florida to New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And in Europe, it's defined as the amount of light that you get in the noonday sun in the Mediterranean at the south of France.
So is that based on like lumens as well as
yes.
like a time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you get now, some have contended that really the only way you should be doing it is pay people to go outside in the noonday sun in Florida or New Mexico or the south of France. And but what it is the multiple of time you can stay out in the noonday sun in now New Mexico before you see the first sign of reddening.
Which is called erythema, correct?
Correct. So, and the erythemal response is greatest in the UVB, which is nominally 280 to 290 nanometers up to that 320. And it's not all created equally. It kind of peaks around the erythemal response about 290. And it's either a clinical grader, because what they do is there's a defined mass of or weight of sunscreen that's applied somebody's finger.
To the back, correct?
To the back in a square of defined size. So what they do is they paint squares on people's backs, panelists that they pay. No one is forced to do this. And then they have calibrated light that's supposed to be frequently calibrated to stay at the noonday sun level. On all of those spots, which is probably, I think it's a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter square, a defined level, which is about twice or close to 3 times the amount that real people put on their skin in an area.
Ooh, yeah. We also have to discuss that you need to be within a Fitzpatrick skin type, correct, in order for them to be able to look at the erythema response.
What a great topic that is, because we've tended to use Fitzpatrick or very light skin. It's a scale, and at the low end is very, very, who never tan, just go straight to burn. And those are the panelists that you want. Fitzpatrick 2s do get a tan, but it's a balance of tan and burn, and their skin is fairly light as well. but FDA is encouraging that you use some Fitzpatrick 3s
Yeah. Okay.
in your panel, which are kind of in the middle. But it's really tough for, and it's either an expert grader at each one of those spots or a colorimeter
yeah.
to measure. But there's also discussion about the panelists not only skin tone and burn response, but also the time of year that you
If you have
have
dry
this done.
skin,
Now,
it may be.
dry skin, also your burn response. Now, that whole base tan thing is
was an interesting fad that happened during my teenage years. Yes.
Yes. But at the end of the summer, people's bodies have responded such that they get the first sign of reddening later than they do. And it's we don't understand it fully, but you can have 3 labs, all doing their job correctly and get very different SPFs.
Yeah. And in terms of that, so let's say I buy a product and it has an SPF 50. Does that mean that it takes approximately 50 minutes of exposure to, let's say, peak sun conditions, whatever that is defined as, to burn? And that is how that SPF is defined.
Well, great question. Now, SPF, since it's a multiple, if you burn or not burn, it's the first sign of reddening in 10 minutes. That's 10 times 50.
Oh, okay.
And so, but an interesting part that people don't grasp so fully is an SPF 15 cuts out about 93% of the UV light. An SPF 30 is about 97.
Interesting.
So when you think about something above SPF 30, we're talking about that last 3% that's getting through.
Yeah.
And it was capped at 30 for years. The industry said there are some people who benefit from a higher than 30. And as you can imagine, as you think about the test, it's really tough to catch that.
Yeah, it's almost like it's conferring a higher degree of safety than is actually there, right? Because
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And is that much more sunscreen, better for you? Would people use less?
Yeah.
Sunscreen?
Because sunscreen, like, as you mentioned, the amount that is applied is a lot more than people use. And SPF, unfortunately, the reason it fails, I would say, is how you're not applying it correctly. You're not applying it as frequently as you should, right? It's a user error.
Yes. And with this UVB radiation, we can think of it as burning rays, and getting a sunburn also contributes to the potential for skin cancer.
Yeah.
So we tend to think about the UVA radiation as the one that's most toxic. They, in fact, work together. The skin has a memory. So sunburn protection is really important when you're going to get a lot of sun at one time.
Yeah.
But a high SPF is not really necessary. And there's one school of thought that it's it's not better for you every day,
Yeah.
the higher SPF. And so we think of the burning ray or the UVB rays, we have another ray because we have UVB radiation is your shorter wavelengths,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so very high energy, but they don't penetrate very deeply within the skin. And so I think of another ray at that point who's very high energy, but not very deep. Maybe Rachel Ray.
Oh.
No, that's
I hope we don't get canceled here, Mark.
Oh no! Well, no. Yeah. Tell me if that's under threat, and I'll talk to her and say no. That's it's a compliment. Hey, you're successful. Not dealing with weighty issues. There, people just they want to enjoy themselves, and they enjoy themselves with your program. So, so we have the Tampa Bay Rays, we have Rachel Ray, and those UVB and UVA. And UVB, the burning rays, are really time of day, time of year, also altitude. So,
and so these are the ones that actually are more indicative of the SPF value because you are looking for that erythema response.
Correct.
Is it correct to say that even before you get to the erythemic response, you likely are already having maybe potentially some damage that's already being done by the UVA rays?
Correct. And there's also look at, say, the whole blue light thing.
Ooh,
and we're very attuned to that with the screen that I'm looking at right now, which is a great big giant one.
Oh yeah,
Jennifer, you are huge right now.
Wonderful! I have added light too, so I'm really doing a number here on these podcast recordings.
Yes, and we think of these things and all that. It turns out that all of that's dwarfed by the blue light that we're exposed to outside.
Yeah.
It's almost a joke, the thought that we're aging our skin sitting in front of screens. Maybe it's doing something to our eyes, but to the skin, no. But if we support companies that have ingredients that go into sunscreen. So if you want to sit in front of a screen with sunscreen on, more power to you. That's great. But you're getting pummeled with it when you go outside. There's another part that people are growing aware of, and that's just the IR.
Oh.
Infrared heat.
Yeah.
And, being outside, getting a lot of sun exposure. And as you mentioned, before you get burned, are you getting potential damage to your skin, the UVA, and just quite literally the heat can be damaging to your skin. More than just the physical ouch. That's hot. It's catalyzing potentially some reactions, and so there's some thought that the lab conditions in which SPF is done is not fully representing the sun exposure that we get outside and the protection that products can deliver.
Yeah. And so getting to SPF, we have some SPF actives, sun filters, and some people may be familiar with the different categories. I like to refer to them as inorganic and organic. I know sometimes organic and chemical get used. I don't like to use chemical.
No, good.
But when we think about inorganic, we're talking about those mineral-based SPF actives versus organic, which can generally be thought of as synthetic or, broadly they contain a carbon atom, right? So, can you walk us through a little bit about the differences between inorganic and organic sunscreen? I'm actually interested, and I think people would be interested. This came up on my social media feed. I had somebody I follow who's a cosmetic chemist explaining the differences and how they work. And I think this might be, something that people hear about, but hear again from very disparate sources. And so enlighten us the difference between inorganic and organic sunscreens.
Right. And I'll only make up half of this. No, sorry.
We have no fact checker, so it's fine.
All right. What a relief. To me, one of the great mysteries of life is that, you have a natural and organic product. What you won't use in them are organic sunscreen actives. One of the great mysteries. Organic sunscreens, which are synthetic organic molecules. Whoever came up with them was just brilliant in the thought process, in that how they work is that they're in what's called the ground state. So they are there when UV radiation hits them. They go up to an excited state, and they take the UV radiation, and as they go back down to the ground state, they pass the energy off as infrared. So what they do is they convert it from ultraviolet to infrared. And just completely brilliant. And different sunscreen, organic sunscreen actives absorb best in different wavelengths. So as we talked about that erythemal or reddening response, different sunscreen actives are better at protecting at different wavelengths. And so that's how they work. And when we think, maybe I'm anticipating a question there is, well, what's the difference as you put a formulation together? It's how they work, but also thickness and consistency of that film and how much of it and where do they absorb. And so that's how your organic sunscreens work. And some of them absorb best in the UVB, and some in different parts of the UVB, and some of them just overall absorb more of the light. And sometimes that's a factor of what they're swimming in, because that can even change how well and at what wavelength they absorb. And so that's one of the other aspects of formulation is what other emollient oils might you have them in to get them to work better. But each of those different organic molecules has a different sweet spot that can be moved around, and how much light it can take in overall. Because when you think about that mechanism up and down, it happens really, really quickly. But nobody yet has beaten the speed of light. And so these things are going up and down and up and down and up and down, but not faster than the light's coming in. And so when they're up, they can't take another photon of light. And so it's how fast they do this, at what wavelength, and how much of it you have in there so that you can catch as many of those photons of light that are coming in as possible. And granted, those organic sunscreens, if the wavelength is out of where they absorb, it's going right on past.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's in the excited state, it's going right on past. And so you have your inorganics, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. We've traditionally believed that they work via scattering. They're rocks, and the lights bouncing off of them, and as a shield. And it turns out that might not necessarily be the case. And then you get into the whole nano, non-nano thing. And you think about how big these things are when they're in a formulation, because they don't practice perfect social distancing. And so,
especially above a certain pH.
Yes, and so, but and that's a whole discussion unto itself, the whole nano thing. But really, it turns out that all the inorganics that protect against UVB radiation have primary particle sizes below 100 nanometers.
Which is considered
there, I said it.
Okay, real quick. Raise your hand if you have dealt with active instability. If you have ever opened a jar of retinol cream and smelt an off odor, or noticed your formula went dark brown, chances are you are dealing with active instability. It's never fun when the formula you've been working on goes south and the due date is only days away. That's why we've encapsulated the trickier ingredients to work with so you can kick the stability struggle to the curb. From retinol to vitamin C, we make it easier to work with those ingredients that typically give you that 3 p.m. headache. The cellulose shell shields the active from outside exposure. Things like air and light that are likely to cause active breakdown, giving you the power to create stable and effective formulas without the trial and error. Ready to quickly create effective skincare formulas? Discover Tagra's Cellucaps line by going to tagra.com/cellucaps. So, have you encapsulated yet? Now back to the show.
However, there is an aspect ratio, right, to consider in terms of that nanometer, because if a particle, it has one measurement that is below that nanometer but is longer, correct? It's no longer considered nanoparticle.
Well, that had been the case, but now the EU said that in one or more dimensions, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. So that's where they...
A very, very important aspect of the EU guidance is that the method of analysis is not defined.
Oh, okay.
So I think we're tormenting ourselves because in the U.S., that's a marketing claim.
Yeah.
And having nano particles in your sunscreen is not only not restricted in Europe, they are unanimous, as is FDA, that nanoparticle titanium dioxide are both safe and effective. So there is no restriction. The only stipulation, if you have what's defined to be a nanoparticle in your sunscreen, is on your back panel, on your ingredient listing, in lowercase letters, in parentheses, NaNO.
Yeah.
It's probably 5 millimeters. So it's not a restriction. It's not anything. But as we understand how they work, this brings to light, sorry.
So many puns.
I know. It's sickening. Pity the poor people that I work with, okay? Is photon of light hits the inorganic sunscreen active, and most of it is not scattered. the energy, the ultraviolet energy jumps in a semiconductor-like effect from what's called band gap, energy band gap, to a second and off as IR, infrared, just like the organic sunscreens. One of the fundamental differences, though, is that the inorganics don't get tired.
Yeah, but the organic,
because they're rocks.
Yeah.
And organic sunscreens, in that energy process, dissipation process, some of the energy can bleed off and they can undergo some photodegradation.
Yeah.
And so as we think about our organic sunscreens and how we continue to lose more and more of them from reef safety issues, octinoxate, oxybenzone, our two best UVB absorbers. Let's be clear, we lost the two best ones. We lost 25 years ago, one that's better than either of those two, the Patamate O.
Yeah.
The octyl dimethyl, which is not PABA.
Yeah,
but
different.
People still do PABA free. And then, so now for UVB, we have octisalate, octocrylene, and homosalate. And homosalate now, there's talk of it being restricted in Europe for body care products to 0.5%.
Yeah, so not an effective amount.
Yeah. They were clever. They didn't ban it because then they'd get a whole lot of blowback. So no, you can still use it.
Just in an amount that no longer can be used for sun protection. And we'd be remiss without discussing why it is that, what is the viewpoint in terms of, you touched upon one, the reef safeness, which is perceived with these organic filters. But in terms of human health and safety, do we want to touch upon just briefly the thought process? We don't have to have anything conclusive on it because I don't think there is. But what is the potential either fear mongering or safety concerns that are associated with these organic filters?
Okay. Yep. With the reef safety, it's almost a moot point because if they're legislated out, then there's no way back in terms of reef safety issues. That was another thing that I thought was pretty silly, but I did look at some of the numbers and it's plausible. I don't know that it's probable, but some of the thought process is plausible. That yes, you could get enough of those sunscreens into reef-sensitive areas that could be an issue. What FDA is studying now is more the aspect of those organic sunscreen actives penetrating the skin, and you've seen some of the reports of entering the bloodstream. Urine, as we do, part of our work is working with pharma and cosmetic companies on optimizing delivery of oil-soluble bioactives and water-solubles. Some of these wonderful bioactives have a really tough time based on their physical chemical properties, and we have to encourage them by good formulation design to get into the skin. As we look at the models that we have and go, all right, what are some of these lipophilic materials that have the best chance of penetrating the skin? Oh, which ones are those? They're the organic sunscreen actives.
Yes.
They have a low molar volume. Their polarity gap between the barrier and them is very low, and the liquid ones, they're the ones that you dream about If they
Yeah.
were wonderful bioactives to get into the skin. And
Yeah.
thinking about getting into the skin and discussion about nano, because the concern about nano is that these sub 100 nanometer particles
Are able to penetrate. Yeah.
so an intact stratum corneum barrier, and okay, we'll do basketball now. And an analogy, it's the stratum corneum, intact stratum corneum barrier, which is very complex, very well designed, tells 50 nanometer particles, 20 nanometer particles, 10 nanometer particles, much less 100 nanometer particles to get that weak stuff out of here. So they, just block that shot every time.
Dikembe Mutombo passed about a month ago, but he was the not in my house, right?
Yeah. No. Get that weak stuff out of here. And so, it's a unfounded concern. And with the discussion about how they work, it's all about surface area.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller the particle for a given mass, the greater the surface area. You need greater surface area
in order
for greater sun protection.
Yeah.
So that's my diatribe on that. So.
And in terms of the organic filters too, they, obviously there have been publications in terms of its ability to, be detected in blood and urine. But I do want to highlight, I think for those listening in, that there still remains a gap in terms of what that means, right? In terms of if there is any impact to that on the body. Those studies have yet to be done in there. So there hasn't been any definitive link between, the absorption of organic filters and a negative health outcome. But in an abundance of caution, I think that the some governing bodies are starting to potentially either phase them out or reduce their use levels while we try to bridge that gap, right, of evaluation.
Yeah, and FDA, sometimes people take shots at them. They're taking a very measured approach with that and taking that issue very seriously. If they believed at this moment that there was a serious health threat, they would just say, we're done with them, because there is a viable alternative in the inorganic sunscreen actives. And so I'm thinking that as we move forward, as we have fewer and fewer organic sunscreens with which to work, and we still want our high SPF beach products, that the next wave is really going to be combinations of organics and inorganics, because 1 + 1 can equal 3 when you look at it that way.
So I think we're going to have a part 2 because I had one question which I feel like I should have known better when I wrote it down as, what elements impact the performance of sun filters and formulation? That's a whole nother 60 minutes we could do.
Yeah, but that's
but I do want to touch upon a little bit of what
course,
you said
yes.
in terms
of a key to having an effective sunscreen is that it, for one, that it exit the package on a regular basis and be applied to the skin. So it's got to feel and look nice, but in the most broad sense, it's that consistency and thickness of the film on the skin. And there are certain types of formulations, and one, a water and oil emulsion, one where it's a non-traditional type where oil's on the outside and you have droplets of water on the inside. You do get much higher SPFs and better resistance to wash off. And there are formulation techniques that you can use now to make them not feel greasy and to spread more nicely on the skin. So I think there's a lot there that we can maximize our efforts. Also, those combinations, I think, are going to be important. Now, one of the things that you can't do is combine avobenzone, which is the primary UVA absorber, organic UVA absorber, with either titanium dioxide or zinc oxide. So then you go, okay, how am I going to make a broad spectrum product?
And in that regard, is it because of incompatibility? Is avobenzone the one that degrades rapidly without combination with octasolate? Is it, or homosolate?
Yes, or other photostabilizers, which actually also act as really. They do that too. I don't know. I've speculated because you're required to use USP titanium dioxide, zinc oxide.
Always coated, right?
Well, the USP does not stipulate that you surface treat it to prevent the photocatalytic effect that uncoated small-sized titanium dioxide can have. But that's my only guess. I think today, with the technology we have, there's really no good reason why they should not be used together. But instead of fighting, we innovate instead, and there's at least one grade, middle-sized grade of titanium dioxide that can be used to replace avobenzone. So we just have to get creative here. And in fact, it appears that it's you can use half as much as you use avobenzone and get the same UVA protection and get your broad spectrum protection. And one of the things you may ask is, what, pray tell, is broad spectrum protection?
Yes.
Have I read your mind there?
Yes, definitely. What is broad spectrum protection?
Yeah, broad spectrum protection is, and that's a lab test. That is not a in vivo or using people. And so what it is you look at the total area. If you look at the whole UV protection spectrum from the Tampa Bay rays to Rachel Ray, going this way, and you look at that and say, all right, it's protecting in all those wavelengths, and you have kind of an area under that curve. But then you start at the 400 and you start to move back until 10% of that area is on the side of UVA. And it's kind of complicated to think about, but it's really almost like a ratio. Is that you've got your total protection spectrum. We want at least 10% of that total protection to be way out at that UVA side.
Got it. Okay.
And as you can imagine, the higher your UVB, the tougher it is to get the broad spectrum. And if you don't have an SPF 15, you can't claim broad spectrum protection, even if it's all. And that moving back, I forgot the most important part, is as you move back, if you cross 370 nanometers, you've crossed over the critical wavelength and you can't claim broad spectrum protection. So that's how it works. You don't get extra points for more than 370 nanometers. But if you're 369, you can't claim it at all. If you don't have an SPF 15, you can't claim it at all. So if you have liquid makeup, which has titanium dioxide, but it's the big giant type, which does scatter, and we pay it to scatter and to be white on the skin. it gives you about an SPF of 8. It's almost all UVA protection, but since it's not a 15, you can't claim broad spectrum protection, so they put in organic sunscreen actives in there to make up the difference to get it at least to a 15. But we think, daily sun protection, low SPF, SPF 15, which gives you a lot of broad spectrum protection, and is the ultimate anti-aging.
Yeah.
You just put it on every day.
And so, I think we're again, I'd love to do a part 2, but in terms of, kind of wrapping up this conversation, you obviously are working a lot with people that are looking to solve complex challenges. And I know you've personally introduced me to some technologies that have been, really fantastic in terms of achieving an aesthetic as well as an SPF value that I was really targeting. But what are you seeing as some of the innovation in this area? And how has that changed over time?
Yes, yeah. So it has been all about as high an SPF as you can go. I think the trend is toward daily facial protection, as I mentioned. Lower SPF, I think, for our beach products this coming season, we're going to see many more combo systems. We might see homosalate fallout, and with our inorganic systems, it's going to be ones with continually better aesthetics, lower whitening, even with darker skin tones, some pigmented sunscreens that which as well help with your UVA and blue light protection. So, and maybe drier feel in some of the tech that we've worked with that increases SPF and also makes those greasy water and oil formulas not feel greasy, as some cool grades of porous spherical silica.
Yeah.
So soft, smooth sand where somebody, I don't know who, pokes a lot of holes in them so that it makes them oil absorbing.
Yeah.
So you get this what's supposed to be greasy, and it feels like it absorbs. Now, to say it absorbs is a touchy subject because, the organics, sunscreen's absorbing into the skin. But I think we're going to continue to see better aesthetics in both the beach and the daily, but maybe some sanity in terms of the SPF race, but getting more to.
And do you think, when you mentioned earlier too, kind of even your evolution of knowledge in terms of pollution and how that, it actually is maybe not just a siloed issue of, pollution protection, but how it exacerbates, aging and potential, immunosuppressant state. Do you see pollution protection being kind of an increased area of focus that will be, synonymous with SPF protection?
I think so. And, your daily products. And as well, I think there'll be a trend toward daily sun protection products that offer enhanced moisturization.
Yes.
Because ones that are appropriate for using either just by themselves or almost as a primer.
Yep.
Or, no, not almost as a primer, as a primer. And then you can put your liquid foundation, your blush, anything else over the top. But they're designed to be appropriate by themselves or as the supporting actor. But really, because the enhanced moisturization also with the skin health, and they're a healthier barrier can be also better protecting against the sun and can help your sun protection product work better. So we've got some cool innovations going that, and then one final thing, we think the sprays might go away, but be replaced by streams.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
So what is that? That's not an aerosol, right? That's like a bag on valve, or
Well, a bag on valve or a simple trigger sprayer that you don't think about the misting issues. You don't worry about mist flying around or people breathing it. It's in a very much more simple package, but it comes out as a stream. Kids could have fun shooting each other.
Not in the eyes, ocular irritation, well known.
But, it would more would reach the target site, in a stream. So we're playing around with that.
Awesome. Well, this is great. Thank you. I think, we'll have to do a part 2 to dig in a little bit more on how to start shaping formulas and how to think about balancing the aesthetics that, become problematic in terms of coverage, whiteness, and greasiness versus water resistance and all of that.
Yes.
On another day. But thank you for your time today, Mark.
Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity.